For some of you, settling into that sense of refuge in your breath might be very easy and quick for those of you who have a meditation practice. I want to offer another quick exercise for those of you for whom that might have been a little difficult. If you can, I invite you to bring to mind the 2 or 3 people that you trust most in the world. This is just for you. No one's going to disclose these names, so be honest. Bring to mind those 2 or 3 people that you trust the absolute most. And for a moment, see if you can connect with what it feels like to trust them. You might do that by bringing them into your mind and imagine them keeping you safe somehow, and see how your body responds to that. That feeling of safety, certainty, peace, trust, that's what we're talking about today, and it is invaluable. You've probably heard that our intern minister, Casey, is leading a series of discussions on the proposed revision of Article 2 of the UUIA bylaws. I realize I just started sounding like an attorney. But Article 2 is the portion of the bylaws of our national organization that includes our principles and sources. It's basically our mission statement. So rewriting it is a big deal. The first meeting last weekend of this discussion was great. One of the comments of the new discussion that jumped out at me was an observation that the proposed new words use the word covenant a lot. It shows up over and over. The current version, the 7 principles, starts with these words. It says, "We, the member congregations of the UUA covenant to affirm and promote," and then the 7 principles are named. But in the proposed new version, the word covenant is used repeatedly to introduce each of the values. Things like, we covenant to cherish the earth. We covenant to learn from one another. We covenant to dismantle oppressions. We covenant to transform and grow spiritually and ethically. We covenant to compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. We covenant to use our resources to build fully accessible and inclusive communities. There is a lot of covenanting going on in these proposed revisions. But that's for good reason. Covenant is at the foundation of our tradition, both in our history and today. As a non-creedal faith, what holds us together isn't a professed belief that we all have in common. What holds us together is this mutual agreement of how we will treat one another in this journey of spiritual growth. Whether it's unspoken or unspoken, covenant is the glue that holds us together. And it goes way, way back, all the way back to 1648. In colonial America, a lot of small independent churches were popping up all over the place. There were orderly Anglicans and Presbyterians, and an array of Puritans and Congregational churches. Those were our predecessors. Each of those independent churches had their own unique beliefs and their own way of organizing themselves. And you have to keep in mind, this was back in the days when government was tightly related to churches. They didn't like all this chaos so much. So the government of Massachusetts said, we got to figure this out. There has to be some orderly way of doing this. So in 1648, the congregations got together and came up with the Cambridge Platform. And it basically outlined the backbones of how we still exist today. It said that every congregation could choose its own minister and control its own property and finances. Every congregation could select leaders. Thank you, Board of Trustees, for your unending patience. And every congregation could decide how members would be a part of the community. faced with that challenge of organizing themselves and defining membership, these new American religious communities used covenants, a simple document for members to agree on how they would treat each other. The covenants were written and signed by each member of the congregation, like we still sign that membership book today with new members. According to the Cambridge Platform, church members offer themselves in faith as they voluntarily consent to a mutual church covenant. It's easy for us today to get confused between a covenant and a contract. You do this for me and I'll do this for you, or in the case of housing, we all agree to do exactly X, Y, and Z to keep our homes nice. That kind of tit-for-tat rule isn't really the goal of congregational covenants. For us, you might think of it as convening, to come together. A covenant isn't a contract of particular promises that restricts relationship. It's the opposite. A covenant is a foundation for our relationships to expand. And the relationship in the long run is more important than the individual actions that we spell out in writing. In a covenant, if any party fails to honor the shared commitment, and we know that happens, we're not perfect, the other has permission to call them back where they fell short, to call them back into relationship and ask, what's happening? To be both challenging and supportive at the same time. When we welcome new members to Tapestry, we ask them to join in a very simple covenant. We ask that members participate with an open heart and mind. We ask that they share their resources of time and money as possible. And we ask that when things are less than perfect, we work together to make them better before walking away. It's short, it's simple, it's fairly realistic, I think. We build our communities not through adherence to one particular understanding of God. Instead, we build community by making a covenant to grow, to trust each other. It's not perfect. In fact, it's bumpy, and it takes some work. But this is how we do religious community. One of the TV shows that I've really enjoyed watching in recent years was Kim's Convenience. I know a handful of you enjoyed it. It's a show about a Korean family who runs a convenience store in Toronto, hence the name Kim's Convenience. Like many family sitcoms, a lot of the episodes explore how funny and frustrating family life can be, including the very long marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Kim. One episode in particular tugged at my heart. In different scenes of the same episode, both the husband and the wife acknowledge the work involved in their relationship and the strange pride they had found in what they built. Early in the episode, Mr. Kim says to his daughter, "Loving your ama, your mom, is the hardest thing I've ever done." The daughter's a little taken back by his honesty, but she knows that it's well intended. Much later in the episode, toward the end, we hear Mrs. Kim completely mirror the language of Mr. Kim as she proudly proclaims the success of her life. "You know, loving your appa, your dad, is the hardest thing I've ever done." I love it because they see the success of their relationship is incredibly hard work. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend Kim's Convenience. It's a sweet show and offers an interesting window into Korean Canadian life. I think part of the show's success is how it depicts the work and struggle involved in loving families. I bring this all up because building trust, both demonstrating it to others and growing our own capacity to trust, is a bit of a project. It takes effort, and it is never over. We all want to be seen as trustworthy. I actually think it's one of the highest compliments we can earn. Yet just telling someone directly, "Trust me," is about as effective as telling people to calm down. It doesn't work that way. Telling people how they should feel is a recipe for disaster. We cannot declare ourselves trustworthy. Instead, we have to do the work, demonstrating that we are reliable through our actions, and we have to do it over and over. The unfortunate thing about trust is that it's a lot easier to lose than it is to gain. I like to think of it as a big bag of rice. Building trust over time is like adding 1 grain of rice. Each time you show up, each time you are kind, each time you are responsible and predictable, each time you keep the secret or turn in the assignment or pay the bill. Individually, these are small efforts, but slowly they add up one by one to fill the bag. But trust can be lost a lot more quickly. A loss of trust is like slashing that bag of rice with a knife. A lot more than 1 or 2 grains is going to spill out. The algebra of our human relationships is rarely straightforward, and the trust account takes time and effort to build up. That's why it's so valuable, I suppose. I know this isn't new information, it's actually kind of elementary, but I'm reviewing it all because I hope that the next time any one of us is questioned, we can remember, oh right, I have to demonstrate trustworthiness through my actions. This isn't about saying the right words to convince someone to trust me. This is about earning trust over time. And the way trust is built is very personal. Their ability to trust is somewhat out of our control. Everyone's process for trust is unique and shaped by a whole life history. It's not logical or linear. Your willingness to trust has nothing to do with how smart you are. It has much more to do with how secure you feel. That feeling has been informed by layer upon layer of honesty and deceit, nurturing and abandonment, going all the way back to your earliest days. How much evidence we need to feel safe to trust different relationships varies greatly. For one person, investing $1 million may come very easily, while showing emotional vulnerability to a best friend is nearly impossible. Another person may wear their heart on their sleeve but have a deep distrust in institutions. Some of us are more trusting across the board, while others a little more deeply suspicious. There's a wisdom to that old adage that I think Dave was getting to in the opening remarks. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. No one wants to be taken advantage of. And yet, trust isn't something we turn on and off like a switch. It's not a yes or no, black or white proposition. Remember the rice metaphor. Trust is a dynamic thing that changes over time. But all of us need to feel that security of trusting other people in our lives, at least sometimes. One of our goals might be finding the people who will add rice to our rice sack. People who we can depend on to be honest, caring, and fair. We can't expect perfection in others. We're all human. As a rule, we all mess up now and then, but good friends who build our trust account are people who are willing to be vulnerable and reach out to us and apologize for the injury done. Good friends aren't just there to comfort us or to have fun. Good friends are people we can rely on. Growing our capacity to trust the goodness in the world. And that need runs very deep. Reverend Barbara Merritt describes the feeling of trust that defines a healthy childhood as something that in adulthood we might be searching for in our prayer or meditation lives. She describes her own child and the way he experienced trust as a 15-month-old, and how the sweetest part of her day was putting him to bed. This probably resonates with those of you who have raised children. At the age of 15 months, the world was a laboratory, a vast expanse of adventures that must be explored. She writes, "There were toilet paper rolls to unravel, dressers to empty, bookshelves to clear, trash baskets to dump on the floor, papers to tear, pans to bang, books to redistribute throughout the house and office, pigeons to chase in the park, food to massage into his hair, a brother's toys to covet and fight over, and a considerable collection of bright and educational playthings to utterly ignore." It was a very demanding day for this little person, all this exploration, and by 7:30 in the evening he was exhausted and cranky, like a tiny drunken sailor wobbling around. When Reverend Barbara warmed up a bottle of milk, he climbed into her lap and miraculous transformation occurred. As he drank, all the tensions and agitation left from his face. As he nestled in, the frenetic energy and the frustration disappeared. Often he would smile to himself and hum a little bit before falling asleep in a few minutes. In different ways, for a very long time, we humans have found this place of comfort, safety, nourishment, and love in our parents' arms. We were trained by nature to return again and again to sustaining relationship. There are always more adventures to explore tomorrow out there. But babies, whether out of instinct or necessity, pause to recharge and reset in another person's care. Reverend Barbara wonders if meditation and prayer might be motivated by the same instinct. Are we nestling into reality? Are we pausing to trust what is out there and come to peace with what is inside? Are we finding refuge in our breath and learning to be okay with our body and our heart, however they are in the moment? In this posture of receptivity and trust, we allow for the possibility that something bigger than ourselves will hold us, feed our hungry souls, and give us peace. Whether it's through spiritual practice or through our friendships or our family, building that feeling of trust is essential to our happiness. We need other people. We need to know, at least occasionally, that we are safe and protected. And it may not be very popular to say, but that need to feel safe, that need to trust, is okay. Amen.